Ridley just launched the Noah 3 and the pro-focused Noah Fast 3. And I think that their head-turning or perhaps head-scratching geometry is a preview of some of the things we might be seeing in the future, perhaps some new trends. So let's take a look at what they did with their bike's geometry, why they did it, and how it might impact us as kind of regular riders and endurance cyclists in the future. At first glance, the new Noahs look like a simple iteration on the modern road bike. The top tube shrouds the Noah Fast's stem. It has deep tube profiles, deep fork legs, decent tire clearance, narrow handlebars that flare out for sprinting and descending, and there's some little nods to SRAM with UDH and a derailleur mount cover. But SRAM seems to have discovered how to make a front derailleur now, so maybe one by is dead again. I digress. All fine, but not terribly interesting. What's causing a stir with these new models, though, is their geometry, namely the steep seat tube angle. It varies from 76.5 to 74.5 degrees in different sizes, and that's much steeper than the classic 73 to 74 degrees on typical race bikes like the Cervelo S5, Canyon Aeroad, and Trek Madone. The bottom bracket is lowered by up to 7 millimeters too, Ridley say to match taller modern tires. What's going on? The marketing blurb suggests a steeper seat tube angle opens the hip angle at top dead center of the pedal stroke. Trends from the past few years like shorter cranks work to the same end. It's been suggested the development of short nose saddles was to steepen the effective seat tube angle while obeying the UCI's 50 millimeter saddle setback rule. These efforts kind of help to counteract the closing of the hip angle that we may have experienced recently by other trends like a focus on slightly lower seat heights and moving the cleat position rearward. Critics have suggested this steeper seat tube angle puts the rider's weight too far forward over the front wheel and could ruin handling. Compared to the SL8, the gold standard road bike, which already has moderately steepened seat tube angle, the Noah is 1 to 1.5 degrees steeper in equivalent sizes. That equates to a central saddle position on the seat post being about 1.5 to 2 centimeters further forward relative to the bottom bracket, which is significant. It's really encouraging pro riders to set their saddle setback at the very limit of the UCI rules. If we had 2 centimeters of stem length and slammed our saddles 2 centimeters forward for the same effect, our bikes might handle quite poorly. But that's not the best way to look at this, since that's not actually what Ridley have done. Let's alter our perspective a bit. We've been trained for years that bike geometry starts at the bottom bracket. Instead, let's focus on our bodies. Imagine yourself on your bike. The saddle, handlebar position, stem length, front fork, wheel, and crank arm length are all locked in place. To further open up the hip angle, the bottom bracket must be moved rearward, and to maintain saddle height, slightly lower too. When shifted back by 20 millimeters, the front center increases by 20 millimeters. The chainstay length would ideally shrink to maintain that fore-aft balance, but it gets impossibly short. The rear axle needs to move back too, increasing the wheelbase by that same 20 millimeters. We can see all of these changes almost exactly when comparing the new Noah 3 with its predecessor, the Noah Fast Disc. Instead of steepening the seat tube angle, we can say that Ridley just moved the bottom bracket backwards a bit. So then to answer the critics, is our stickman rider still too far over the front wheel? Actually, not at all. Their upper body is still in exactly the same position relative to the front tire. If anything, this revision to geometry has probably increased overall stability. Opening the hips is claimed to benefit pros and amateurs alike, and it seems to be a modern cure-all for bike fit. Practical gains include easier rotating of the hips forward, with potential benefits for saddle comfort. A pro can more comfortably achieve an aggressive position, which is why they created the Noah Fast. It's got like 3 centimeters lower head tube. For us regular folks though, we might also experience less tightness in the upper legs and lower back, maybe reduced knee pain, and perhaps less shifting on the saddle may be experienced too. Being more forward on the bottom bracket also feels better when climbing in the saddle, at least for me. 20 millimeters of rearward movement would have about the same effect as shortening cranks by 10 millimeters. With all the buzz around these claimed benefits, I wouldn't be surprised to see more modern road bikes with steeper seat tube angles and longer reach to follow suit. Just remember that this is an outcome of moving the bottom bracket backwards, and that stack is independent of this choice. It doesn't mean that bikes are getting more aggressive. Some of us in the long-distance cycling space may benefit from this progressive geometry even more than the pros. Specifically, any long-distance cyclists who use aero bars. In my video 2 years ago on aero bars for road bikes, I mentioned how a steeper effective seat tube angle, for moving the saddle forward and using shorter cranks, can help us to open up the hips and facilitate using aero bars more sustainably. You may find pictures of ultra cycling legends like Christoph Strasser with their saddle slammed forward for this reason. But I also mentioned we're limited by overloading the front wheel and inducing oversteer with typical road bike geometry. The new Noah could well be a response to the needs I outlined in that video. Maybe someone over at Ridley is a fan. My solution since 2015 is to just buy bikes a size too large, and then use either the Redshift dual position seat post like in this picture, or just slam my saddle forward as much as possible to create a similar effect as the Noah offers. But this is still limited by typical road bike geometry. For maybe the past 6 or 7 months though, I really feel like I've been pushing the limits of what traditional or classic road bike geometry allows. Even though the bikes are a size too big, my position on the aero bars is as far forward as I can get it. If I go any further, it really does start to ruin the handling, so I need a longer front center just for that stability. I'm not even able to position my ISM saddle here as far forward on the saddle rails as I'd like because I get too cramped on the bike. So progressive geometry like what the Noahs are offering, and maybe future bikes that pursue that same line of thinking, may help open up some new possibilities for bike fit that might result in a more comfortable and more sustainable aero bar position. The only real downsides I've seen to using this position for the past few years is a little bit of extra pressure on the hands, which can be alleviated with softer tires or with suspension stems like I've been using. Another downside potentially is the standover height is too high, especially when using a long top tube bag like this Apidura one. So I've just been a little bit extra careful at stoplights. The Noah Fast is targeted at pro racing cyclists, and the regular Noah still seems targeted at the everyday road cyclist, but nothing for us endurance cyclists yet. But this geometry trend may be soon applied to endurance bikes too, and it may be worth considering. It's crept in a bit on gravel already. The new Merida Silex, ridden by Mohoric to the Gravel World Champs, I think in 2023, has a 74.5 degree seat tube angle, long front center, low bottom bracket, very similar to the Noah in the larger sizes. You know, they own a chunk of Specialized too, so maybe a new progressive geometry Venge or maybe a Reacto could be on the horizon. With about 6 centimeters of higher stack being the main difference between the Silex and the Noah Fast, perhaps a Silex with some slick tires is the closest thing we can get to an endurance version of the Noah at the moment. Long chainstays are the only thing preventing the complete progressive package here, and they're good value too if you want a head start exploring what's to come. As you can probably tell, I'm pretty excited about this development in geometry. And as a matter of fact, I've been hunting for a frame with basically the exact same geometry as the Noah 3, not the fast one, but the regular one. I've been looking for that frame shape for about a year or so, maybe just over a year now. And my first couple of interests, they were close, but none of them had enough tire clearance for my needs. After my neck injury, I had to pause the search a little bit, but finally about 2.5 months ago, I got into talks with a frame with almost the same geometry as the Noah Fast. It had good tire clearance, beautiful paint job. So I'd been in talks trying to purchase that one to use here on the channel and explore this progressive geometry. But unfortunately, I heard this week, just on Monday, that it's basically vaporware in my size across the entire world. Cry, cry. Undeterred, there is another option that I found. And as soon as the Lunar New Year holiday is over, I should be able to get the ordering and building process in for this frame. So I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and get a frame to be able to test out this new progressive geometry. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that build, and also the impressions about what this might bring for us endurance and ultra endurance cyclists. Also, if you think you know what the frame is, leave your guesses in the comments below. I'd be very curious to hear if you have any other insights on other progressive geometry bikes, or if you just think you know what I'm going to be buying. But looking forward to it. It's going to be an exciting time. And what do you think about this progressive geometry? Is it something you'd be interested in, or are you going to stick with the classic 73-degree seat tube angle bikes? Looking forward to hearing from you, and see you in the next video. Take care.